Okay, let's just try to simplify the system because it seemed a little bit too difficult. I didn't even add in the grain roller. Like, I actually cracked my own grain before I even put it in this picnic cooler. Making beer has its drawbacks about the grain too. The grain, it's actually really dirty. It has dirt in it. There's rocks in it. It was just a field of barley, and they don't really wash it. So just think about that. Sometimes you can find pieces of metal, like barbed wire and stuff, and you're like, this is some raw product. It's only like $35 for a 50-pound bag. I was thinking like I'm gonna start brewing a lot of this shit, but I never really went through a bag. I'd go through like half a bag and then I'd quit brewing for a while because that's a lot of grain. So, the grain gets in your nose. Like when you crack the grain, there's all kinds of bacteria all over the grain trying to eat the grain. Once you get that shit up in your nose, you will have an allergy attack like none other. So wear a mask when you're like cracking the grain. That's the smart thing to do. I usually didn't have any allergy problems if you wear a mask while you're cracking the grain. But here's my new brewing system that I would basically do. Okay. Try to find a different thing to brew than beer because beer is kind of dumb. I'm not gonna beat around the bush. Cracking the grain and soaking the grain in water and then draining into a kettle. Hours and hours and hours. What you're really trying to do is get the sugars out of the grain and have a fermentable product for the yeast to eat. The yeast are a single-celled fungus, so they need sugars to consume. Why not just give them sugars? Like, that's all they require. Is beer really everything to you? You could make something else. You could make fruit wine. You could make honey wine. Anything that's made out of sugar. You could even make brown sugar. One of the coolest things I made was brown sugar, lemon, low alcohol, kind of a tea beer. It's called Tahitian Sati. Sati is actually kind of cool. People like that shit. And it's just sugar water with some, you know, I'll go into it later. We'll make some Sati or something. But my new system would just be the one keg at the bottom that you boil, and then I would either heat up the water and then put some honey in there and then go to my fermentation chamber. And I wanted my fermentation chamber to basically have a conical fermenter in it. So what this does is it allows the yeast to settle to the bottom and you could dump it out. Once you could do that, if you could dump the yeast out of your fermenter, you can actually still use the fermenter as a serving keg. There's no yeast in it, so why transfer it from here to here? All you're trying to do is get it off of the yeast. If you can close this, get the yeast out of it, and pressurize it, you can serve out of it. That's just here to here. None of this, none of that. So that's my plan. Is like if I have to go back into this battle of like creating some alcohol, I don't know why I would. I'm just going to add fermentable sugars like concentrated grape juice, 100% grape juice with some water in it, whatever. I'm telling you, everything matters right here. The whole art is in the fermentation. If you can create a good fermentation with the right yeast, it doesn't matter what kind of sugars you use. You can create wine, you can create honey wine. I would recommend like the honey wine. The mead thing, a lot of people go towards making beer and they end up making mead. Mead is honey wine. You just add honey and water. First you boil the water, then you pour in the honey, then you drain it into here. And then from here, I would say you can put it into bottles if you wanted to. Because you can. You can basically add in a little bit more honey water to this before you try to bottle it. And what that'll do is add a secondary fermentation in the bottle because there'll be more sugars for the yeast to consume while they're inside of the bottle. It's really not that much harder. You just empty out of this spigot here into a bottle. And then you cap it. over the foam. The foam will create some CO2 bubbles that go over the cap, and then you cap over the foam. And that way, the whole headspace has been purged of CO2.